he was changing a tire on his dune buggy, and I had this junky little brown bike that my dad took the training wheels off. And I kept trying to ride it, ride. And finally, I was going down my street, and I rode the bike on two wheels. And I turned around, and I'm all, Dad, I can ride a bike. I don't know why I remember that, but I remember it clear as day, screaming, Dad, I can ride a bike. And then I crashed. But after that, man, there was no stopping me. In fact, we had a little group of guys in my neighborhood. My neighborhood was awesome because it was like a pretty good-sized neighborhood, but it was a cul-de-sac. So there was only one way to get into the neighborhood and one way to get out. So there was no through traffic in there. So it was just wide open, and we rode our bikes everywhere. We played cops and robbers. How many of you guys ever played cops and robbers on bicycles? Awesome, right? How many of you guys ran into each other playing cops and robbers? Yeah. I remember jumping off a curb and T-boning my buddy, and we both pretty scraped up. But we lived on our bicycles. We had a place right by our house that was called the Pit. And there was like railroad tracks here, and for some reason there was just this huge pit that made for epic jumps. So you would go down and up and jump, and then there was one that you jumped into the pit, and that one always terrified me, but we were always at the pit, or we were always riding our bikes. And then as I got a little bit older, I got into road bikes. So I would do 100-mile road bikes. I was all over road biking. But then it all came together. In the early 90s, late 80s, this thing came out called mountain biking. Hallelujah. It was amazing. So I could take my BMX background. I used to race BMX and road biking because you have gears, you can go long distance and go fast. And they packed it all into this one bike that you could do everything on. And I was like, this is the most epic thing ever. So I saved up my nickels and dimes, and I went and I bought a mountain bike. Now, I didn't have a lot of nickels and dimes, so I went and I said, hey, this is how much I have, and I need a mountain bike. The guy sold me, it was called a GT Timberline. Bike weighed about 285 pounds. And it was an early mountain bike. And then the first month, I broke both the wheels, flattened both the tires, bent the handlebars, and broke 2 pedals. And I kept bringing it back to the guy going, dude, you called this a mountain bike. And he's like, I didn't know you were going to ride it like that. Well, you didn't ask. But that started this vicious cycle of now I need a better bike, a better bike, a better bike. And so all through that time, for 15 years, I was always on my mountain bike. I could tell you everything there was to know about mountain bikes, what the best parts were, what the best brands were, why that bike was better than that bike. And it wasn't because I studied mountain bikes, it was because I just loved to ride them and I loved to be around them. So I knew everything about it, just like anything you guys are interested in. You just develop knowledge over time. But then I got married, and this happened. And life got crazy busy. And so I would, instead of riding 3 or 4 times a week, it cut down to, I'd ride once, twice a week. Then it turned into, I'll ride a couple times a month. And then it was like, I'll ride once a month. And then I'll ride, I'm cool. I'll just ride when I can ride. And it turned out I'm riding like every 2-3 months. No longer did I know everything there was to know about mountain bikes. I'd go into my bike shop and I'm like, my bike's broken, but I don't know what to replace this derailleur with. Like, I knew back in the day this was a good one. I don't know about that. So I kind of fell off of that. I still ride mountain bikes. Haven't been on my mountain bike in probably 4 months. Last time I rode, I think I broke a rib. So that could be why I haven't been on in a minute. But I would still call myself a mountain biker, right? Would you call me a mountain biker still? Heck yeah, I'm a mountain biker still. Thank you, guys. Getting my support. But why? Because I own a mountain bike? Because I rode 4 months ago? I'm not sure I still am a mountain biker. And Paul kind of talks about that in Philippians 3, verses 1 through 11. Paul starts to talk. He wrote this letter to the church in Philippi, and man, he wrote like most of the New Testament. So this dude is very, very godly. And he wrote to the church in Philippi, and he starts it off saying, man, I love talking to you guys. I love writing these letters to you because these letters like encourage you, and I love to tell you guys about Jesus. But then in verse 2, he kicks in and he says, watch out for those dogs. I love that phrase. Watch out for those dogs. Anyways, those people who do evil, those manipulators who say you must be circumcised to be saved. All right, Paul, you're getting a little personal now, buddy. So back in the olden days, circumcision was a sign or an essential thing to do if you were a Jew. And if you were Jewish, you were one of God's chosen people. So what Paul's saying here is, yes, the Jewish people are important people, but the fact that you've gone through this humanly act does not mean anything. Which was a controversial stance back in the day. Paul's telling the church in Philippi, hey, what you've been told your entire life, what has been important to you your entire life, and everybody told you that if this happens, you are part of God's family, that doesn't matter. Because this new guy, Jesus, came around. And he continues on, and he says, look, I'm not telling you this because I want to be a jerk, or I'm just jealous that you guys are Jewish and I'm not. He goes on and he says, in verses 5 through 8, he goes, I was circumcised when I was 8 weeks old. I've been a Jew my entire life, is what he says. I am a pure-blooded citizen of Israel, a member of the tribe of Benjamin. He also does sound for us back there. Thanks, Ben. He was a Pharisee. How many of you guys have ever heard that word Pharisee? How many of you guys have any idea what a Pharisee is? Pharisees were the religious leaders at the time. They knew the Bible, the what? Thank you. Just like the Torah, back and forth. They could quote scripture like nobody's business. They used that as kind of a look at me thing as you read through the New Testament. Anytime you see the Pharisees talking to Jesus, they're using scripture to try to shut Jesus down. And Jesus is just like, nope, you're not going to do that. So he said, I was a Pharisee. He was so Jewish that he persecuted Christians when the church was being established. He saw Jesus. He saw Jesus do miracles and love people, and he persecuted and killed Christians. He said he obeyed the law without fault. So what Paul's trying to tell us here is, I have cred. I know how important it is to be circumcised, to be Jewish. I know what all of this means. But in verse 7, Paul says, I once thought these things were valuable, but now I consider them worthless because of what Christ has done. What an amazing testimony. He devoted a majority, all of his life to that. And the power of Jesus made him realize these things don't mean a darn thing. Just like when I was riding mountain bikes, I could go back and say, dude, I've been riding since I was 10 years old, or I've been riding mountain bikes since they came out, and I knew everything about them. I am worthy of being called a mountain biker. I am worthy of your respect. Even though you can ride better than me, you should respect me. But it doesn't mean a thing unless I get on my bike and pedal it. Me being a mountain biker doesn't mean anything if I don't ride a mountain bike. And that's what Paul is saying here. He's been devoting his whole life to living under the law and doing everything that the Jewish faith is told him to do. But all of that is worthless because of the love of Jesus. Paul has become a disciple of Christ. In verses 10 through 11, it says, I want to know Christ and experience the mighty power that raised him from the dead. I want to suffer with him, sharing in his death, so that one way or another I will experience the resurrection from the dead. Paul is all in. When he says, I want to suffer with Jesus, those aren't just words. Paul went to prison multiple times for Jesus. He ended up dying for Jesus. He is an all-in disciple of Christ. And he says, I want to do this until my death. I want to give everything to Jesus until my death. What Paul is saying is being a disciple of Jesus means seeking Jesus in everything. He relies on Jesus for every decision that he makes, is what he's telling us. Now, I've been married for 23 years. My wife and I dated for 5 years before that. So we've been together for 28 years now. Yeah, thank you. And it has been a picnic. Like, we've never argued. We've never had hard times. We've always loved each other dearly. No, I'm just kidding. Yesterday we had arguments. Ruby's like, yep, heard that one. We've been married for 23 years. Now, a priority of both of ours when we met each other, when we started dating, was that we had to love Jesus. In fact, we met at church. I was running a college group, she was in the college group, and that's where we first started dating. We've been through tons of craziness together. We've gone through, both of us, losing a parent. We've gone through heart attacks and health issues and times when we just don't want to do it anymore. Times when we are just like, you know what? It is just too much. And in fact, we got to that point about 2 years ago. Everything was colliding in our world. Her mom was very, very sick. My dad was just being a not friendly guy. I couldn't come up with a friendly word. Just being kind of a jerk. There was just all kinds of stuff was coming at us all at once. And instead of us relying on our faith and clinging to each other and clinging to everything that we've been through, we started pushing each other away. We started bickering and fighting and arguing over the most ridiculous things. I can't tell you how many times we argued over where do you want to go for dinner. How many of you guys have ever had that argument, right? Yeah, everybody. Where do you guys usually go? Who knows, right? What do you feel like? I don't care. Well, how about we go to Chick-fil-A? I don't want Chick-fil-A. Well, then you care. All right. Where do you want to go? I don't know. It doesn't matter. All right. Well, let's go get pizza. I don't want pizza. Oh, my gosh. Okay, fine. I'm just going to eat at home. We were in that stage. We were bickering and arguing and fighting. And we realized that through the love of God, He placed people in our lives that said, hey, you guys don't seem to be doing very well. And we went, we're fine. And these people were like, are you sure? And I was able to be honest with one of my good friends and say, no, we're not. We're not doing well. We're arguing all the time. I don't want to be married anymore. There are times when I can honestly say, if I didn't have 2 kids that need a family, I probably would have called it quits. And there were people that spoke into my life through God that said, do something. Here's the number to some counselors. Yeah, a counselor. I can't afford that. And it took me almost 8 months to finally call somebody and get some help. And we called this Christian lady that was recommended by a friend of ours that turned out to be like, God went, I'm going to design you to help the Longos. And she placed this lady in our lives to speak truth into our lives. Now we're all happy and everything's perfect. So yeah, that's, and let's pray. No. God has used this time to do unbelievable things in our lives and in our marriage. But what that counseling takes is complete 100% willingness to be vulnerable. We have to open up. We have to open up to each other. We have to open up to God. We have to open up to our counselor. And that's what Paul is talking about here. He's talking about just a complete, even if it hurts, even if it's not fun, especially when it's not fun, complete obedience to God and surrender. So He can disciple us and He can speak into our lives. What Paul is saying is it doesn't matter how much you know or how much you do, without seeking Jesus, it's worthless. Without seeking Jesus, it's worthless. Just like our marriage could have turned into this worthless pile of staying together for the kids. But through seeking Jesus, there was healing there. Then we get into verses 12 through 14. Verse 12 says, I don't mean to say that I have already achieved these things or that I have already reached perfection, but I press on to possess the perfection for which Christ first possessed me. This is Paul that we're talking about. Paul is like a very influential guy in starting the church, the Christian church. Everybody knew who Paul was. Everybody knew who Paul was. He wrote all these letters. He wrote half the New Testament, or more than half the New Testament. He was an influential guy. And he says, I don't have it all together. I tell you, you need to give everything to Jesus. You need to devote your entire life to Jesus. I don't have that yet. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, he says. But I am striving to do that. I am striving to seek God in everything I do. So when I die, the discipleship that God has given me will bring me to oneness with him. And oh man, those got backwards, sorry. In verse 13 it says, no, dear brothers and sisters, I have not achieved it, but I have focused on one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Jesus Christ, is calling us. Man, he just approaches this whole thing with such humility. But the one thing that stands out in all of these verses is perseverance. This whole listening to Jesus and being a disciple is not something that is a temporary thing. He tells us this is a lifetime commitment that we are making. This is something that we need to persevere and we need to hang on to the end. When it gets hard, when it's fun, when it's not fun, we need to seek Jesus in everything. And part of seeking Jesus is having people in your life that will help you seek Jesus. I don't know about you guys, but man, I feel so much better knowing that God wants me to be in relationship with other people. Just like with our marriage, I am so thankful that God doesn't say, just struggle through, read the Bible, and you'll be fine. He's placed people in your life to help you through this. And he's telling us that following Jesus is a lifelong journey. And I was reminded of this the other day when I was out at the beach and riding my motorcycle, and I had the day before seen a post from my old youth pastor and his wife and a project that they were doing at their church in Long Beach. I just happened to be out there, and I'm like, I'm going to stop by and just see if he's there. Now, I haven't seen my youth pastor probably 30 years. Probably since I graduated high school, I hadn't seen him. So I'm like, I'm just going to go by. And I went by, and this is him. He's dressed all grungy because he was still working on that project. But I went by and saw, his name is Keith King. He was my youth pastor, my high school youth pastor at a church called Granada Heights Friends Church. And God used this man to speak into my life like you wouldn't believe. Well, maybe you would, because I'm sure Jeff has spoken into your life too. But God placed this guy in my life at the exact right time. The way he loved Jesus, the way he taught, the way he showed he cared about us was just hand-tailored for me. He wasn't overly pushy, but he pushed enough to let me know when I was messing up. And it was so fun to just sit down and talk with him and be like, where have you been? What have you been doing? What's been going on in your life? And the one thing that really stood out through all of our conversation, everything we talked about was what Jesus had done in our lives. Now, if I had gone and met with Keith and saw him, and he said, well, actually, I'm a dancer now, and don't really love Jesus too much anymore. It was a good thing. It helped me out. It did what I did, and I'm glad it helped you, and I'm glad you're still part of it, but dancing is my life now. I would have been destroyed. One, because he danced better than me, but I would have been so hurt that the person that spoke so much truth into my life was now not part of Jesus anymore. But instead, we shared about all the struggles that we had been through, the different ministries we'd been part of. I shared about you guys and what part I have at this church. And we prayed together, and it was just really, really exciting to know that the man that's helped me start my walk with Christ persevered. That he became a true disciple of Jesus. And he's been in ministry, I think he said 45 years, something like that. And it wasn't all roses and flowers. Roses are flowers. Roses and dancing. In fact, he told me the ministry he's in right now, the church that he's in, is the hardest thing he's ever done in his entire life. But he felt like God called him there. There's been 2 or 3 people like that in my life. Keith King, a pastor named Tim Walton, and a man named Greg Mills. Those are 3 people that have spoken so much truth in my life. They have discipled me. They've walked with me. And one thing that Jeff said the very first week we started this that stuck with me hard was, what you need when somebody is discipling you is to make sure that they are always turning you towards Jesus. Make sure that they are always turning you towards Jesus. And I look back at the relationship I have with Keith or with Tim or with Greg. And every time I was struggling, every time I was having a hard time, they steered me back towards Jesus. So right now, we are going to, if you haven't destroyed those cards quite yet, I guess I shouldn't say don't destroy them quite yet. I would like for you guys to get in groups of like 3 or 4, okay? If you guys have noticed that we didn't do any worship through music today, there's multiple ways of worshiping Jesus. And so we're not going to worship through music because you don't want to hear me sing. But we're going to do it in a different way. So I'd encourage you guys, just break up into groups of 3 or 4. You could either turn your chairs right where you are. If you want to go sit somewhere else in the room, that's fine. But let's do it real quick. Grab that pencil and your cards and break up into like groups of 3 or 4. And you need to kind of be in like a little circle where you guys can talk with each other. Ready, go. Like turn your chairs so you're all facing each other. All right, so what we're going to do right now, you can see with these cards who's God placed in your life to disciple you, and how is God placed, dyslexia kicked in again. Who has God placed in your life to disciple you? And who has God placed in your life to disciple? So, before we answer those questions, let's take a few minutes and pray together. okay? So, I don't, if everybody in your group wants to pray, that's great. If not, just, Nathan, turn your chair and just kind of join that group there. Spend a little bit of time and ask God to reveal to you who in your life he's placed there to disciple. If a name doesn't pop right into your head, that's fine. If a name does pop into your head, confirm it. Just spend some time praying to God and listening to God about who you think would be a great disciple in your life. Okay? And I'll close this off in just a few minutes. So just pray amongst your groups. You guys can pray out loud if you'd like to. You don't have to pray silently. Okay, now I would like for you guys to just pray about what in your life is keeping you from a deeper discipleship with Christ. What in your life is keeping you from a deeper discipleship with Christ? You guys can pray out loud. This isn't like be as quiet as you can or whatever you want to do. Okay, now I'd like for you guys to pray about who God can bring into your life that you can disciple. All right, now I'd like for you to take the next 3 or 4 minutes, fill out those cards, and share with the people in your group what you wrote down. See, this is a way that we can disciple each other. If we share with each other what God has revealed to us, we can hold each other accountable. So take the next few minutes, fill out those cards, and just share with your group what you wrote down. So we have about 5 minutes or so left. What I'd like to do is, you can stay in your groups, you can go back in rows, whatever you'd like to do, but I'd like to pray together as a group, to offer our worship to Jesus in prayer. I'd encourage you guys to pray for what he's revealed to you today. If he spoke to you in any way, if he revealed somebody that you believe needs to disciple you, maybe pray for courage to go ask the person, or, what needs to change in your life to become more of a disciple, or whatever God is saying to you now. Let's offer that up to him as a worship. And we'll just take the next 5 minutes or so and pray as a group. Pray out loud as you see fit. God, I thank you for discipling us, and loving us about our own individual needs, Father. Lord, I pray that anybody you bring in my life, I lead them to you in everything that I do, Father. And Father, heal me of the doubt I have, and the times I feel like I'm just wasting my time, Lord. And God, I pray that in those times I seek you most. God, we know that you hear our prayers, whether they're spoken or unspoken. Father, Lord, we lift all these prayers up to you. Lord, and we just ask that you hear them and that you respond in a way that we hear clearly. And Father, again, thank you for loving us. In your name, amen. Hey, let me encourage you guys to seek out that person you wrote on your card. If there's somebody that you believe God has placed in your life that could speak truth into your life, go talk to them. Just bring it up. It's a great way to get your relationship with Jesus to the next level. All right, love you guys, and we'll see you on Wednesday.